Cheating is rarely about not loving a partner. Much more often, it's about unmet psychological needs, internal conflicts, personality patterns, or poor emotional skills that the person never learned to handle in healthy ways. Most affairs don't start with sex. They start with tiny psychological shifts that look harmless and reasonable at the time. If you can spot these early, you can stop the slide months before anything happens. Infidelity is prevented by skills and awareness, not feelings. Couples who avoid it tend to talk openly about emotional needs, maintain personal identity outside the relationship, set very clear boundaries with others, address resentment early, talk about sex honestly, notice when they start seeking validation elsewhere, be aware of vulnerable life periods, know their own attachment patterns, practice uncomfortable conversations instead of avoidance, treat harmless attention as an early warning sign. The uncomfortable truth. Most people who cheat don't wake up planning to do it. They drift there through small unmet needs to small secrets to emotional closeness to rationalization to affair. And at every step, it felt justifiable. That's why prevention is about catching the first step, not the last one. Why do men and women cheat? Most people think cheating happens because love fades, attraction dies, or someone meets the wrong person at the wrong time. But that's rarely the real story. Infidelity rarely begins with a desire for someone else. It begins with quiet psychological shifts inside a person long before another person ever appears. A slow feeling of being unseen, a fading sense of identity, unspoken resentment, emotional loneliness inside a stable relationship, a need for validation that no one knows how to ask for. Conflict is avoided instead of expressed. Sexual needs wrapped in shame and silence. Life transitions that quietly shake a person's sense of self. Attachment patterns formed in childhood. A brain wired for novelty and stimulation. Weak boundaries that don't look dangerous until they are. And the remarkable human ability to compartmentalize two emotional worlds without feeling the full weight of either. By the time cheating happens, the psychological groundwork has often been laid for months or years. And from the outside, nothing looked obviously wrong. This is why infidelity is so confusing, so devastating, and so hard to understand. The betrayed partner thinks, if you loved me, how could you do this? The person who cheated often thinks, I love you, and I still don't fully understand how this happened. Both can be telling the truth. This book is not about excusing cheating, it is about understanding it. Because when you understand the real psychological pathways that lead people here, something surprising happens. Infidelity stops looking like a mysterious moral failure and starts looking like a series of small, preventable emotional missteps that went unnoticed for too long. You will see how affairs often begin with unmet emotional needs, not physical ones. Loss of personal identity in long relationships. The search for validation and ego repair. Emotional immaturity and conflict avoidance. Resentment that was never voiced. Attachment wounds that play out in adult intimacy. Sexual dissatisfaction that felt too risky to discuss. Vulnerable life transitions. Novelty-seeking brains chasing dopamine. Weak boundaries combined with constant opportunity, and the mind's ability to keep love and betrayal in separate compartments. You will also see why chemistry with an affair partner can feel overwhelming. Why people can genuinely say, I love you, to two people at once. And why most affair relationships collapse once exposed to real life. Most importantly, you will see that prevention is not about surveillance, control, or blind trust. It is about emotional awareness, communication, boundaries, and protecting each other's identities long before temptation appears. Infidelity is painful, but it is not random. It follows patterns, predictable ones. And what is predictable can be understood. What is understood can often be prevented. Personality traits most linked to cheating, regardless of gender. These traits show up very consistently in research and therapy settings. High need for validation. They rely on outside attention to feel good about themselves. Conflict avoidant. They would rather escape than address relationship problems. Poor boundaries with the opposite sex or preferred sex. They enjoy emotional closeness and don't recognize when it crosses lines. Novelty seeking / easily bored. They chase stimulation and newness. Low emotional self awareness. They don't understand their own needs, so they act them out unconsciously. Avoidant attachment style. They feel suffocated by deep intimacy and create distance through affairs. Entitlement thinking. I deserve this. I've sacrificed so much. Ability to compartmentalize. They can separate worlds without feeling internal conflict. Difficulty tolerating discomfort. Instead of having hard conversations, they seek relief. History of seeking external coping. Using attention, flirting, or romance to deal with stress, aging, or insecurity. The key insight. Affairs don't begin when attraction starts. They begin when boundaries and emotional honesty end. How couples actually prevent this, realistically? Not by policing each other, but by making these normal to talk about. Are you feeling emotionally seen lately? Are we still flirting with each other? Have you felt drawn to anyone else recently? Healthy couples can say these things without panic or accusation. That openness kills affairs before they start. There is such a thing as harmless attraction, but most people don't understand where the line is, so they cross it without realizing. Attraction is automatic. Attachment is a choice. Secrecy is the turning point. Here's how to tell the difference and what to do the moment you notice feelings forming. What harmless attraction looks like. This is normal, human, and happens even in very happy relationships. You might notice they're attractive. A brief flutter, appreciation of personality or looks, then you move on with your day. Key features: harmless, dangerous, no secrecy, starts being private, no emotional sharing, personal conversations begin, no anticipation. You look forward to seeing them, no comparison to partner, you start noticing your partner's flaws more. No behavior change, you adjust your behavior to be around them, no fantasy, you imagine scenarios with them. Harmless attraction is observed. Dangerous attraction is fed. The moment attraction becomes risky, it becomes dangerous when you start doing any of these. Thinking about them when they're not there. Feeling excited when they message. Wanting to impress them. Sharing personal thoughts or relationship frustrations. Hiding interactions from your partner. Seeking opportunities to be around them. Feeling more yourself with them than at home. That's no longer an attraction. That's the beginning of emotional transfer. What to do immediately when you notice feelings forming. This is the part most people never do, and why affairs happen. Step 1. Name it honestly to yourself. I'm developing feelings. This is dangerous. No minimizing. No, it's nothing. Clarity kills momentum. Step 2. Cut emotional access, not just physical access. This means no personal chats, no texting unless necessary, no one-on-one situations, no sharing emotional content. You don't manage temptation, you remove oxygen from it. Step 3. Redirect the energy back into your relationship, because the feelings aren't really about that person. Ask, what am I missing? Where do I feel unseen? What do I need more of at home? That's where the real work is. Step 4. Increase transparency, not secrecy. You don't have to confess attraction, but you do the opposite of hiding. Mention them casually. Don't conceal interactions. Keep everything in the light. Affairs grow in the dark. Step 5. Rebuild novelty with your partner. That spark you feel is dopamine from novelty, not compatibility. You recreate novelty at home, new experiences, flirting again, new conversations, physical closeness, and the rule that keeps people safe. If you wouldn't do it in front of your partner, you shouldn't be doing it. That single rule stops 90% of emotional affairs. The uncomfortable truth. People don't cheat because they met someone amazing. They cheat because they allowed a normal attraction to become an emotional connection. And that happens through small repeated choices. The good news, if someone catches it early and follows these steps, the feelings usually fade within weeks, because attraction without feeding it dies naturally. People often say, I've never felt chemistry like this before, and they genuinely believe it. But what they're feeling is not deeper compatibility. It's a very specific psychological cocktail that cannot exist inside a long-term relationship. Why the affair chemistry feels so intense. It's a mix of five powerful forces happening at the same time. Novelty plus uncertainty equals dopamine spike. The brain releases the most dopamine not from pleasure, but from uncertainty and anticipation. Will they text? When will I see them? Do they like me? That suspense is addictive. Long-term partners don't create this because they're predictable and safe. You only show the best 10% of yourself. With the affair person, no bills, no chores, no responsibilities, no bad moods, no real-life stress. They meet the highlight reel version of you, and you see theirs. You're bonding over fantasy selves. Secrecy intensifies bonding. Secrecy triggers adrenaline and cortisol. That stress state heightens emotions and sexual attraction. The brain mislabels this heightened state as passion and chemistry. It's actually a stress response. Emotional needs are being met without relationship weight. They're giving each other attention, validation, curiosity, listening, desire. All the things long-term couples stop doing regularly, without any of the effort real relationships require. It feels easy because it's incomplete. Projection fills in the blanks. Because you don't know them well, your brain fills in the gaps with ideal qualities. You're not attracted to who they are. You're attracted to who you imagine they are. Why these relationships rarely last? Because the moment the affair becomes a real relationship, during an affair, after the affair becomes real, mystery, familiarity, fantasy, reality, effortless, work required, best behavior, full personality shows, no responsibility, bills, moods, stress, habits, dopamine, oxytocin, calm attachment, and the chemistry drops sharply. They often say, it's not the same as it was before. Because the before was neurologically artificial, the deeper reason it collapses. The person didn't fall for the new partner, and they fell for how they felt about themselves around that person. Desired, interesting, alive and free, seen. When daily life returns, that feeling disappears because it was never coming from the person. It was coming from the situation. Why do many cheaters try to return to their original partner? Because real love is built on history, safety, shared life, deep knowledge of each other. Things the affair never had. They mistake intensity for depth. Intensity fades, depth remains. Is it true that it never lasts? Statistically and clinically, very rarely. Most affair-based relationships fail within 6 to 18 months once exposed to real life because they were built on escapism, fantasy, projection, unmet needs that still aren't solved. Those problems follow them into the new relationship. The painful irony, the things they were seeking from the affair partner are often exactly the things they could have rebuilt with their actual partner if they had understood what was happening sooner. Many people who cheat say, I love you to both their partner and the affair person. And they are not always lying. They are experiencing two different kinds of attachment at the same time, and their brains are keeping them in separate compartments. Two different systems in the brain. Human bonding isn't one feeling, it's multiple systems. Attachment, love, long-term partner. This is built from history, safety, trust, shared life. Oxytocin bonding, familiarity. This love feels calm, deep, stable, and real. It's the love of you are my home. Romantic/infatuation love, an affair person. This is driven by dopamine and novelty, desire, idealization, fantasy, emotional intensity. This love feels electric, urgent, alive. It's the love of you make me feel alive. These are different neurochemical experiences, and they can happen at the same time without cancelling each other out. That's what confuses the person cheating. They think, if I love this new person this much, maybe I don't love my partner. But the feelings are coming from different systems. How do they mentally justify it? To reduce guilt, the brain creates a story. This has nothing to do with my partner. I still love my partner. This is separate. I deserve this feeling. This is called compartmentalization. They mentally put the affair in a different room in their mind where their partner doesn't exist. Why can they cry over hurting their partner and still go back to the affair? Because when they are with their partner, the attachment system is active. When they are with the person, the dopamine/romance system is active. They aren't emotionally accessing both at the same time, so their emotions feel sincere in both places. Why does this feel like a soulmate to them? The affair person is meeting dormant needs, feeling admired, feeling interesting, feeling desired, feeling understood. So they confuse this person awakens parts of me with this person is meant for me. But what's really happening is parts of them that went quiet in their life are being stimulated again. Why the illusion breaks after exposure, when the affair is no longer secret and becomes real. Guilt enters, reality enters, the compartments collapse. Both emotional systems activate at the same time. Now they feel the conflict fully and the clarity they felt disappears. They often say, I don't even know what I was thinking. Because the mental separation is gone, the key truth, they are not loving two people in the same way. They are loving one person from depth and history, one person from intensity and fantasy. And intensity is much louder than depth, so it temporarily feels stronger, but it is far less stable. Why is this so hard for the betrayed partner to understand? Because from the outside it looks like, if you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. But from the inside of the cheater's mind, it felt like, I love you, and this is something separate that I don't fully understand myself. That doesn't excuse it, but it explains the psychology. Chapter 1: Unmet Emotional Needs. This is one of the most common and least understood paths to infidelity. Because nothing looks wrong from the outside. No big fights, no lack of love, no sexual issues, and just a slow, quiet, emotional starvation that neither person fully notices. What unmet emotional needs actually means. It's not, we don't talk, we don't love each other, we argue a lot. It's much subtler. It's when a person stops feeling emotionally seen, emotionally valued, emotionally known, emotionally prioritized, emotionally appreciated. They feel alone inside the relationship. And they often feel guilty for feeling that way because my partner is a good person, I shouldn't feel this. So they don't say anything, what this feels like internally. The person starts having thoughts like, I don't feel interesting anymore. I don't think they really notice me. We only talk about logistics. I miss being looked at like I matter. I feel more like a role than a person. They don't want sex. They want to feel felt. But they don't know how to ask for that without sounding needy or dramatic, so they say nothing. What happens next? Very slowly. They become emotionally thirsty without realizing it. Then someone new comes along and does very small things, asks curious questions, listens closely, laughs at their stories, compliments their thinking, notices details about them, and the person feels something they haven't felt in years. I feel seen again. This is the hook. Not attraction, not lust, recognition. Emma and Daniel, married 11 years, 2 kids. They love each other, no major issues. Life looks like this. Work, kids, dinner, TV, sleep, repeat. They talk constantly, but only about schedules, bills, parenting, tasks. Daniel hasn't asked Emma in years, how are you really doing? Not because he doesn't care, because life is busy and routine took over. Emma slowly starts feeling invisible. She doesn't complain because Daniel is kind, loyal, and hardworking. She tells herself this is just what marriage becomes. At work, a new colleague starts. He asks, what do you enjoy doing outside work? You're really thoughtful when you explain things. I like how your mind works. He remembers things she says. He looks at her when she talks. She goes home feeling different, lighter, more like herself. She doesn't think, I'm attracted to him. She thinks, I forgot this version of me existed. The critical shift. She starts sharing small frustrations about home life with him. No complaints, just, we're always so busy. I feel tired all the time. He listens, validates, understands. Now emotional intimacy is forming. Still no flirting, still innocent. But emotionally, he is starting to occupy a space that belonged to her husband. What Emma doesn't realize, she's not falling for the man. She's falling for how she feels when she's emotionally attended to. That need had been starved for years. Why does this turn into an affair? Because emotional connection naturally creates attraction. And by the time she realizes this is becoming inappropriate, she's already emotionally attached. And it feels incredibly meaningful because it's feeding a deep unmet need. The tragedy. If Daniel had simply regularly done things like asked about her inner world, noticed her, been curious about her, expressed appreciation beyond logistics, this never would have happened. Not because Emma is disloyal, but because her emotional needs would not have been starving. The key truth: people rarely cheat because they want someone else. They cheat because they want to feel like themselves again. And someone else accidentally provides that feeling. Is this avoidable? Very much so. Couples prevent this by maintaining curiosity about each other, emotional check ins, appreciation, attention, seeing each other as people, not roles. The moment a partner stops feeling emotionally seen for long enough, they become vulnerable without realizing it. Chapter 2: Loss of Identity Inside the Relationship. This one is incredibly powerful and very quiet. It doesn't come from unhappiness, it comes from slow self erasure, and the person often looks like a very devoted partner from the outside. What loss of identity really means. Over the years, a person can slowly become someone's spouse, someone's parent, someone's provider, someone's support system, and stop being a separate, interesting, autonomous individual. They don't feel mistreated, they feel absorbed. Like their personality, desires, quirks, interests, and spontaneity have faded into the background of responsibilities. They start having thoughts like, I don't even know who I am outside this life. I used to be more fun slash creative slash alive. I feel like I disappeared somewhere along the way. This is not a relationship problem. It's an identity problem happening inside the relationship. Why does this create vulnerability to an affair? Because when someone new meets them, that person doesn't see a spouse, a parent, a role. They see a person and they treat them like one. They ask about opinions, passions, stories, dreams, humor, personality, and the person feels something shocking. I remember this version of me. That feeling is intoxicating, not because of attraction, because of recognition of a lost self, the dangerous misinterpretation. They don't think, I'm missing myself. They think, I feel more like myself with this person than with my partner. So they incorrectly conclude, maybe I'm with the wrong partner. But the partner isn't the problem. The lost identity is. Mark and Olivia, married 14 years. Mark is a great husband and father, but over the years his life became work, providing, fixing things, helping kids, being reliable. He used to be playful, into music, social, creative, and funny. Those parts slowly faded because life got serious. Olivia loves him deeply, but their conversations are about kids, schedules, responsibilities, practical things. She hasn't seen that playful side of him in years, not because she wouldn't like it, but because it quietly disappeared. Mark doesn't even realize it's gone. He just feels vaguely flat inside. At a conference, he meets someone. She talks to him like this, laughs at his jokes, asks about his interests, talks about music, engages with him like he's interesting, not responsible. He finds himself being funny again, animated, expressive. He feels alive in a way he hasn't in years. He thinks, I haven't felt like this in so long. This is the hook. What's really happening? She is not giving him something new. She is reflecting parts of himself that his current life no longer activates. But he mistakes that for a connection with her. The emotional shift. He starts looking forward to talking to her because I like who I am when I'm around her. That's the critical sentence in identity-based affairs. Not, I like her, but I like me. Why does this turn into an affair? Because being around her feels like stepping back into his old self, and going home feels like stepping back into the role self. He begins associating her equals freedom, personality, aliveness, Home equals responsibility, dullness, obligation. That's when emotional attachment forms. The tragic irony. Olivia would love to see that version of Mark again. She didn't take it from him. Life did, routine did, responsibility did. But instead of rediscovering himself inside the marriage, he rediscovers himself outside it. The core psychological truth. Identity starvation is extremely powerful. When someone feels they've lost themselves, the first person who reflects their old self to them can feel like a soulmate. But they're not in love with the person. They're in love with the version of themselves that reappears. Why is this preventable? Couples who avoid this make space for individual hobbies, personality expression, playfulness, time as individuals, not just roles, seeing each other as people, not functions. They protect each other's identities, not just the relationship, because when identity disappears, vulnerability appears. Chapter 3. Validation and ego repair. This driver is extremely common and often completely invisible to the person themselves. They don't feel unhappy in the relationship. They feel quietly diminished inside themselves. And the affair doesn't start from desire for someone else. It starts from a desperate need to feel valuable again. What validation and ego repair really means. Over time, life chips away at a person's sense of attractiveness, importance, competence, youth, relevance, specialness. This can come from aging, body changes, career stagnation or job loss, parenting exhaustion, feeling taken for granted, being in a long relationship where admiration has faded into familiarity. They don't consciously think, my ego is hurting. They feel, I don't feel like I matter as much anymore. And they often feel ashamed for feeling that way. Why can't the relationship easily fix this? Long-term partners stop expressing awe, admiration, desire, fascination, not because love is gone, but because familiarity replaces admiration. You stop saying, you're amazing, and start saying, can you pick up milk? The admiration becomes assumed, not expressed. But psychologically, admiration needs to be felt, not assumed. What happens when someone new shows admiration? Someone new sees them with fresh eyes and says things like, you're really impressive. You're attractive. I love how you think. You're different from other people. And it hits a starving part of them. They feel a rush of, I still have it. I'm still desirable. I still matter. That feeling can be addictive, the dangerous misinterpretation. They don't think, I'm seeking validation. They think there's something special between us. But what's special is how the attention is repairing their wounded self-image. Sophie and Aaron, married 12 years. Sophie had always been confident, social, and attractive. After 2 kids, weight gain, and years of routine, she feels different. Aaron loves her deeply. He tells her he loves her. But he no longer looks at her with desire, compliments her, notices her appearance, expresses admiration. Not out of neglect, out of comfort and routine. Sophie starts feeling, I'm just a mum now. I don't feel attractive anymore. I feel invisible. She hates that she feels this way because Aaron is kind and loyal. So she says nothing. At the gym, a trainer starts talking to her. He says, you're doing great. You have amazing energy. You don't look like you've had kids. He looks at her like she's attractive. She feels something she hasn't felt in years. Desired, not loved. Desired. And it wakes something up in her. What's happening psychologically? This is ego repair. Her damaged self-image is being restored through his attention. She starts thinking about him, not because she wants him, but because he makes me feel like myself again. The shift. She starts dressing a little nicer for the gym, looking forward to seeing him, feeling excited when he notices her. This becomes emotionally meaningful very fast because it's feeding a deep wound she didn't know she had. Why does this turn into an affair? Because the validation becomes emotionally charged. Attraction grows from feeling valued, and she starts associating. Him equals feeling attractive, confident, alive. Home equals feeling ordinary, unnoticed, dull. The painful irony. Aaron still finds her beautiful. He just stopped expressing it in a way she could feel. And she never told him she needed that. The core psychological truth. When someone's sense of worth quietly erodes, the first person who reflects value to them can feel magnetic, not because of love, because of restored self-worth. Why is this preventable? Couples who avoid this continue to express admiration, desire, appreciation, noticing, verbal valuing, not occasionally, regularly, because ego doesn't stay healthy on its own. It needs mirrors. And if the partner stops being that mirror, someone else easily becomes it. Chapter 4. Emotional immaturity. This is one of the most misunderstood reasons people cheat, because from the outside the person often looks kind, loving, functional, responsible. They don't look reckless or cruel, but internally they never developed the emotional skills required for long-term intimacy. That's what emotional immaturity really is. What emotional immaturity actually means in adults. It's not childish behavior. It's the inability to tolerate uncomfortable emotions and handle them directly. They struggle to express dissatisfaction, ask for needs clearly, sit with boredom, handle relationship plateaus, have difficult conversations, tolerate feeling unappreciated, work through resentment, deal with inner restlessness. So instead of addressing discomfort, they escape it. And an affair is a very powerful form of emotional escape. How this plays out internally. When something feels off in the relationship, they don't think, I should talk to my partner. They think, I don't want to deal with this feeling. They distract, avoid, suppress. Until something new appears that makes the discomfort disappear instantly. That relief feels like a solution. Why are affairs so attractive to emotionally immature people? Because affairs provide excitement instead of boredom, validation instead of insecurity, ease instead of hard conversations, fantasy instead of responsibility, feeling good instead of working through discomfort. It's not that they want to hurt their partner, they want relief from feelings they don't know how to handle. The dangerous pattern. Emotionally immature adults often have a history of coping like this. When stressed, seek distraction. When unhappy, avoid confrontation. When restless, chase stimulation. When insecure, seek attention. When bored, look for novelty. An affair fits perfectly into this coping style. Jason and Mia, together 9 years. Their relationship is stable, loving and calm. But over time, Jason starts feeling bored, less excited about life, slightly disconnected, irritated without knowing why. Nothing is wrong. He just feels flat inside. But Jason has never learned how to say, I feel disconnected. I need more from us. I'm struggling with something internally. Those conversations feel uncomfortable and dramatic to him, so he says nothing. At work, he meets someone new. She's energetic, funny, and light. Talking to her makes him forget the dull feeling he's been carrying. He feels excited again. He doesn't think, I'm attracted to her. He thinks, I like how I feel when I talk to her. That's an emotional escape beginning. What's happening psychologically? Instead of addressing the boredom and disconnection in his relationship, he is medicating the feeling with novelty and attention. This is emotional avoidance. The shift. He starts messaging her more, looking forward to work, feeling lighter, happier. At home, Mia feels him becoming slightly distant, but nothing dramatic. Jason doesn't connect this to his feelings about the relationship. He thinks, this is just a friendship that makes me feel good. Why does this turn into an affair? Because the relief becomes addictive, and he chooses relief over discomfort. He would rather feel good with someone else than have a difficult conversation with the person he loves. Not because he doesn't love Mia, because he doesn't know how to handle uncomfortable emotions like an adult partner. The tragic irony. If Jason had said just one uncomfortable sentence early on, I feel disconnected lately and I don't know why, the entire path would have changed. But emotional immaturity makes that sentence feel harder than cheating. The core psychological truth. Emotionally immature people cheat not out of desire for someone else, but out of an inability to deal with their own inner discomfort in healthy ways. The affair is an emotional painkiller. Why is this preventable when adults learn to express needs early, tolerate boredom phases, have hard conversations, sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, recognize internal restlessness? They stop needing escape routes because they handle problems where they start, inside themselves and inside the relationship. Chapter 5: Conflict Avoidance. Conflict avoidance is one of the quietest and most dangerous pathways to infidelity because from the outside, this couple looks very healthy. They don't fight much, they're polite to each other, they get along, and there's no drama. But underneath, important things are never being said. And what isn't said doesn't disappear. It turns into distance, resentment, loneliness, and emotional hunger. What conflict avoidance really looks like in adults. It's not fear of yelling. It's fear of disappointing your partner, hurting their feelings, creating tension, being seen as needy, rocking a stable relationship, starting a conversation you don't know how to finish. So they silence themselves to keep the peace. They think this is kindness, but psychologically it creates emotional isolation. What happens internally? They start having thoughts like, I wish they would, but it's not a big deal. I don't want to complain. It's fine. I'll deal with it. I don't want to start something. So they adapt. They have lower needs. They swallow feelings. They become the easy partner. And slowly, they stop feeling known. Why does this create vulnerability to an affair? Because when someone new comes along, they don't have that history of tiptoeing. They speak freely. They express opinions, feelings, and frustrations openly. And the conflict avoidant person feels something surprising. I can be myself here without worrying. They feel emotionally relaxed for the first time in years. That relief becomes attachment, the critical psychological shift. They don't think, I like this person. They think, I don't have to manage myself around this person. That is incredibly powerful. Lena and Tom married 10 years. Tom is kind, dependable, and loving. Lena is thoughtful, caring, and very conflict avoidant. Over the years, Lena has stopped saying things like, I wish we spent more quality time together. I feel overwhelmed. I need more affection. I feel lonely sometimes. Because Tom works hard, provides well, and she doesn't want to seem ungrateful. So she becomes low maintenance. Tom thinks everything is fine because Lena never complains. Internally, Lena feels slightly lonely, slightly unseen, slightly disconnected, but nothing dramatic enough in her mind to bring up. So she carries it quietly. At work, she befriends a colleague. He's expressive, emotionally open, and talkative. He asks her how she feels about things. He shares his own frustrations and thoughts freely. She finds herself talking openly in a way she hasn't in years. She laughs more, talks more, feels lighter. What's happening psychologically? She isn't attracted to him. She's attracted to the feeling of not having to suppress herself. She doesn't have to be the easy partner with him. The shift. She starts sharing small personal frustrations about life, then about her relationship. He listens and validates her. This creates emotional intimacy very quickly because she's starving for expression. Why does this turn into an affair? Because she begins associating him equals emotional freedom. Home equals emotional restraint, and without realizing it, her emotional connection transfers. Not out of desire, out of relief, the tragic irony. Tom would have listened, Tom would have cared deeply, but Lena's fear of conflict prevented the very conversations that would have saved the relationship from this path. The core psychological truth. Conflict avoidance doesn't keep relationships peaceful. It keeps partners emotionally unknown to each other. And the first person who makes them feel emotionally safe to speak freely can feel like a profound connection. Why is this preventable? Couples who avoid this normalize saying things like, this feels small, but I want to say it. I'm afraid this will sound like complaining. I don't want this to turn into distance between us. They treat small discomforts as important early, so they don't grow into emotional gaps later. Because when someone feels they cannot safely express themselves at home, they will eventually feel relief expressing themselves somewhere else. Chapter 6: Opportunity plus weak boundaries. This pathway is different from the others because it doesn't start from a deep emotional wound. It starts from something much more ordinary. Access plus poor boundaries plus gradual rationalization. Many affairs happen not because someone was unhappy, lonely, or unfulfilled, but because they never learned where the line actually is with other people, and they don't recognize they're crossing it until they're already far past it. What weak boundaries really mean. It's not flirting or obvious bad behavior. It's things like being overly friendly and personal with coworkers, sharing emotional details with someone outside the relationship, private texting that feels harmless, one-on-one time that feels innocent, enjoying attention without questioning it, not shutting down subtle emotional intimacy early. They tell themselves, I'm just being nice, we're just friends. This is harmless. And at first, it is why opportunity matters so much. Affairs often require repeated contact, privacy, emotional familiarity over time. Workplaces, gyms, travel, online messaging, these provide exactly that. If you put two people with weak boundaries into frequent proximity, emotional intimacy can form without intention. The psychological mechanism. Humans bond through repeated interaction, personal conversation, shared experiences, emotional disclosure, humor and inside jokes. That's how friendships form. That's also how affairs form. The difference is in where the boundary is placed. People with strong boundaries stop the process early. People with weak boundaries let it continue because nothing bad has happened yet. The slow drift. This is how it usually progresses. Friendly conversations, personal topics, private jokes, texting outside of necessary reasons, looking forward to seeing them, not mentioning them at home, sharing frustrations, emotional closeness, attraction, affair. At no point did it feel like a decision. It felt like a series of harmless moments. Chris and Natalie, together 8 years. Chris is loyal, loves Natalie, and has no intention of cheating. At work, a new colleague joins his team. They work closely on projects and get along well. They joke. They chat during breaks. Nothing inappropriate. Chris mentions her at home casually at first. Step 1. Familiarity grows. They start messaging occasionally about work, then memes, then random thoughts. Chris thinks, we're just friends. No red flags in his mind. Step 2. Emotional tone changes. She starts sharing small personal things about her life. Chris listens and responds thoughtfully. He starts sharing things too. Still feels harmless, but now they are bonding emotionally. Step 3. Secrecy begins very subtly. Chris stops mentioning how often they talk, not because he's hiding anything, but because he senses Natalie might misunderstand. This is the first real boundary crossing. Secrecy enters before anything inappropriate has happened. Step 4. Emotional reliance. He looks forward to her messages, feels understood by her. They vent to each other about stress. Now she knows parts of his inner world that Natalie hasn't heard recently. Emotional intimacy has transferred. Step 5. Attraction appears. One day he notices he's thinking about her outside work. Feels a little rush when she texts. Now he's confused because he never meant for this to happen. Why does this turn into an affair? Because by the time he realizes this is becoming dangerous, he is already emotionally attached, and it feels too meaningful to abruptly cut off. The key truth: this type of cheating doesn't happen because someone was searching for something. It happens because they never learned to recognize the early boundary lines that prevent emotional intimacy from forming with others. The tragic irony. If Chris had done just one thing early on, kept conversations professional, avoided personal texting, mentioned her often at home, avoided one-on-one bonding, nothing would have developed. Not because he's especially moral, because the bond never would have had the conditions to grow. Why is this so preventable? People who don't cheat often have a very simple rule. I don't build emotional closeness with people I could be attracted to. Not because they're paranoid, because they understand how bonding actually works. Strong relationships aren't protected by trust alone. They're protected by clear practice boundaries long before temptation appears. Chapter 7. Novelty seeking and dopamine addiction. This pathway is less about the relationship and more about the person's brain wiring. Some people are especially sensitive to dopamine, the neurochemical linked to novelty, anticipation, risk, excitement, reward, chase. These people don't just enjoy newness, they need it to feel alive. And long-term relationships, by design, move from dopamine excitement to oxytocin, calm attachment. For most people, that feels safe and good. For high novelty seekers, it can start to feel flat, dull, or suffocating, even in a loving relationship. What novelty seeking feels like internally. They often have a lifelong pattern of getting bored easily, loving new projects, new people, new experiences, thriving in the beginning stages of things, feeling restless when life becomes predictable, chasing stimulation without realizing it. They may say things like, I hate routine, I need excitement, I get bored quickly, I miss the spark. They mistake the normal calm of long-term love for something being wrong. Why are affairs neurologically irresistible to them? An affair contains the perfect dopamine cocktail. Secrecy, risk, uncertainty, anticipation, sexual tension, new personality, new attention. Their brain lights up in a way it hasn't in years. They interpret this as, I haven't felt this way in so long. This must mean something. But what it means is, their dopamine system is being heavily stimulated. They are chemically high. The dangerous misinterpretation, they don't think, I'm chasing a dopamine rush. They think, I have incredible chemistry with this person. But chemistry here is neurological stimulation, not compatibility. Ryan and Chloe, together 7 years. Ryan is charismatic, energetic, and always starting new hobbies. He loves Chloe deeply. Their relationship is stable and supportive. But over time, life becomes predictable. Same routines, same conversations, same environment. Ryan starts feeling restless and irritable, but he doesn't know why. He thinks, something feels off. I feel bored with life. He assumes it might be the relationship. At a networking event, he meets someone new. She's witty, spontaneous, and flirty. Their conversation is electric. He feels alert, excited, and energized in a way he hasn't felt in years. Driving home, he can't stop thinking about it. This is dopamine activation. What's happening psychologically? His brain is reacting to newness, uncertainty, attraction, ego boost, risk. He mistakes this chemical rush for emotional meaning, the shift. They connect on social media, start messaging. Every notification gives him a small thrill. He checks his phone more often, feels excited throughout the day. At home, everything now feels extra dull by comparison. Not because Chloe changed, but because his brain is now overstimulated elsewhere. Why does this turn into an affair? Because dopamine is addictive, and he starts craving the feeling he isn't chasing her. He's chasing how she makes his brain feel. Why these affairs burn hot and die fast? Because once the relationship becomes real, mystery disappears, risk disappears, novelty fades, dopamine drops, and suddenly he says, I don't feel the same anymore, because the chemical high is gone, the core psychological truth. Some people cheat not because something is missing in the relationship, but because they are unconsciously addicted to the feeling of newness and stimulation. And they misinterpret that craving as a romantic connection. Why is this preventable? When novelty-seeking people learn to recognize their need for stimulation, channel it into hobbies, travel, challenges, and creativity, create novelty inside the relationship, understand the difference between dopamine and love, they stop confusing excitement with compatibility, because long-term love will never feel like the beginning. And that's not a flaw, it's a different, deeper system. Chapter 8. Resentment that was never expressed. This pathway is powerful because the cheating can look sudden to the partner. But internally, it has been building for years. No big fights, no dramatic breakdown. Just small hurts, disappointments, and unmet needs that were never voiced, never repaired, and never released. Resentment is what happens when pain is swallowed instead of expressed. What unexpressed resentment really is. It's the accumulation of thoughts like, I wish they would notice this. I feel taken for granted. I do so much and it goes unseen. I've given up a lot. They don't understand what this costs me. I stopped asking because nothing changes. But instead of saying these things, the person stays quiet, often because they are non-confrontational, afraid of seeming needy, tired of repeating themselves, trying to be the good partner, so the feelings don't disappear. They harden. What resentment does psychologically? Resentment quietly changes how someone feels about their partner. Less warmth, less empathy, less desire to give, less guilt about taking for themselves. They start feeling, I've given enough. I deserve something for myself. This is where the psychological permission for cheating begins. Not from desire, from emotional accounting. The dangerous internal shift, they stop feeling like an equal partner. They start feeling like an underappreciated giver, and the affair starts to feel less like betrayal and more like compensation. Nadia and Luke, married 13 years. Luke works long hours. Nadia handles most of the home and the kids. Luke loves her deeply and assumes she knows it. Nadia slowly starts feeling overworked, unnoticed, unappreciated, emotionally unsupported. She has tried in the past to bring it up, but Luke would say, I'm doing this for us. So she stops mentioning it. She adapts, becomes strong, handles everything. Years pass. Resentment builds quietly. Internally, Nadia's thoughts become, no one sees how much I do. I don't matter as much as everything else. I'm exhausted being the responsible one. But she never says it anymore and she just carries it. She meets someone through a hobby group. He notices things. You're incredibly capable. You do so much. You deserve more time for yourself. He sees her effort, acknowledges her. She feels deeply understood, not attracted at first, relieved. What's happening psychologically? He is validating the pain she's been carrying silently for years. And that validation feels emotional, meaningful, intimate. The shift. She starts talking to him more, sharing more, feeling seen in a way she hasn't felt in a decade. And in her mind, a subtle belief forms. I deserve to feel this. This is resentment turning into justification. Why does this turn into an affair? Because the resentment has eroded her sense of loyalty, not her love, her sense of fairness. She doesn't feel like she's betraying Luke. She feels like she's finally receiving something for herself. The tragic irony. Luke would have listened. Luke would have changed. But by the time the affair happens, Nadia is no longer asking. She's done asking. The core psychological truth. Unspoken resentment doesn't stay small. It transforms love into emotional distance and self-justification. And when someone finally feels seen and valued, it can feel like something they are owed. Why is this preventable? Couples who avoid this make it safe to say regularly, I'm starting to feel unappreciated. I feel like I'm carrying more than I can handle. This is turning into resentment and I don't want that. They treat resentment as an early warning system, not something to endure quietly. Because once resentment hardens, the emotional protections around the relationship weaken dramatically. Chapter 9. Attachment style, especially avoidant or anxious. Attachment style is one of the deepest drivers of infidelity because it operates below conscious awareness. The person is not thinking, I want to cheat. They are reacting to an internal discomfort with closeness, security, or fear of loss that has been with them since early life. Two attachment styles are especially linked to cheating patterns: avoidant attachment, anxious attachment, and they cheat for very different psychological reasons. First, what attachment style really is. It's your nervous system's blueprint for how safe intimacy feels, how you handle emotional closeness, how do you react when relationships feel too close or too distant. This forms early in life and carries into adult relationships automatically. Avoidant attachment leads to cheating to create distance. Avoidant people love their partner, but deep intimacy makes them feel claustrophobic, trapped, overly dependent on, responsible for someone else's emotions. When the relationship becomes very close, stable, and emotionally intimate, they start feeling an internal pressure they don't understand. They don't think, this is too close for me. They feel restless, irritable, distant, flat. An affair becomes a way to create emotional space without leaving the relationship. David and Claire married 9 years. Claire wants more closeness, more connection, more time together. David loves her deeply but starts feeling overwhelmed by her emotional needs, like he can't breathe, irritated for no clear reason. He doesn't understand why he feels this way because nothing is wrong. At work, he connects with someone light, independent, and undemanding. Being with her feels easy, no expectations, no emotional weight. He feels relief. He doesn't realize he is using the affair to regulate the discomfort of intimacy at home. The affair creates emotional distance from Claire, which calms his nervous system. Anxious attachment leads to cheating to seek reassurance. Anxious people crave closeness but constantly fear rejection, not being enough, being abandoned, not being desired anymore. Even in loving relationships, they often feel insecure underneath. When attention, affection, or reassurance decreases, as it naturally does over time, they panic internally. They don't say, I feel insecure. They seek reassurance elsewhere. Maya and Ben, together 11 years. Ben is steady, calm, and not overly expressive. Maya loves him but starts feeling less desired, less noticed, less reassured. Her mind starts creating stories. Maybe he's losing interest. Maybe I'm not attractive anymore. She doesn't want to seem needy, so she says nothing. Then a co-worker starts complimenting her, noticing her, giving attention. Her anxiety drops instantly when she talks to him. She feels wanted again. She becomes emotionally attached because he regulates her insecurity. She mistakes relief from anxiety for a romantic connection. The key difference: avoidant cheats. Anxious cheats to create distance, create reassurance, escape emotional pressure, soothe emotional insecurity, feel free, feel wanted, avoid being engulfed, avoid feeling abandoned. Both still love their partner, but the affair is meeting an attachment need they don't understand. Why does this feel so confusing to them? They often say, I don't know why I did this. I love my partner. Because the cheating wasn't about love, it was about nervous system regulation. The core psychological truth. The affair partner becomes a tool for managing attachment discomfort, for avoidant space, for anxious reassurance. And neither realizes this is what's happening. Why is this preventable? When people understand their attachment style, they can say things like, avoidant, I feel overwhelmed and need space without it meaning distance. Anxious, I need more reassurance lately and I'm afraid to ask. Without that awareness, they seek regulation outside the relationship instead of inside it. Chapter 10. Sexual dissatisfaction. They're afraid to discuss. This pathway is often misunderstood as they cheated because they wanted more sex. That's usually not what's happening. It's far more about feeling undesired, rejected, ashamed of sexual needs, embarrassed to ask for what they want, afraid of hurting their partner, afraid of being seen as too much, too weird, or too needy. So the issue isn't a lack of sex, it's a lack of safe sexual communication. What this feels like internally. Over time, one partner starts feeling their advances are declined more often, their preferences aren't welcome, their desire level is mismatched, their fantasies feel unacceptable. Sex has become routine, mechanical, or rare, but they don't say anything because sex feels like a dangerous topic. They think, I don't want to pressure them. I don't want to seem obsessed with sex. I don't want to make them feel inadequate. Maybe this is just how long-term relationships are. So they silence themselves. But sexual rejection hits very deep psychologically. It often translates internally to, I'm not desirable. I'm not wanted. Something is wrong with me. What happens when someone else shows sexual interest if another person shows flirting, sexual attention, curiosity, openness, desire? It can feel incredibly powerful because it restores something that felt lost, being sexually wanted. That feeling can be emotionally overwhelming. not because they want that person, because they want to feel desired again. The dangerous misinterpretation. They don't think, I'm starved for sexual validation. They think, the chemistry with this person is amazing. But the chemistry is coming from relief of sexual insecurity. Alex and Priya married 10 years. Priya's libido dropped after the kids and stress. Alex understands and doesn't want to pressure her. So he stops initiating as much. He tells himself, it's fine, this is normal. But internally he starts feeling rejected, undesirable, embarrassed for wanting more, ashamed of his sexual needs. He never says this out loud because he doesn't want Priya to feel guilty, so the silence grows. At work, a colleague starts flirting with him, nothing explicit, just playful comments, eye contact, suggestive humor. Alex feels a rush he hasn't felt in years. He feels desired, and that hits the exact wound he's been carrying silently. What's happening psychologically? This isn't about sex, this is about sexual self-worth being restored. He starts thinking about her because she makes me feel attractive again. The shift, they start texting. The tone becomes flirtatious. He feels alive, confident, wanted. At home, he still loves Priya deeply, but now he associates work equals feeling desired, home equals feeling rejected. Why does this turn into an affair? Because the emotional relief is too strong. And he never addressed the real issue, the sexual silence in his marriage. The tragic irony. Priya would have been open to talking. She didn't know how deeply this was affecting Alex, but because he never spoke, the problem moved outside the relationship instead of being solved inside it. The core psychological truth. When sexual needs feel unsafe to express, they don't disappear. They turn into shame, insecurity, and longing to feel desired. And the first person who activates that feeling can become dangerously attractive. Why is this preventable? Couples who avoid this normalize conversations like, I miss feeling desired. Can we talk about our sex life honestly? I feel awkward bringing this up, but it matters to me. Because sexual dissatisfaction becomes dangerous only when it becomes unspoken. Chapter 11. Life transitions and vulnerable periods. This pathway is about timing, not character. Many people who cheat